Welcome back to another episode of Rebuilding the Palisades podcast. We are here with the legendary architect Doug Burdge, principal of Burge Architects. Doug, thank you so much for being here with us today. We're going to dive right in. We have a lot of good conversation to talk about here. So, first, let's just start off by tell us how you got into this business. How'd you get started?
Well, thanks for having me, for one. I appreciate it, and thanks for being here. Um, well, it's interesting, just on past history. I mean, I kind of have a family of architects. My uncle, Bill Blue Rock, was a big-time architect. He went to USC. I happened to go to USC, also in Southern California, and he had a 100-person firm in Orange County. And being my uncle, it's like, what are you doing and what's your job? And that seemed interesting to me. And then my cousin became an architect also, and so I naturally tended to like building things. Maybe I thought I'd be a contractor, and so I went to visit my uncle down and lived in Laguna, and then down in Newport. I ended up working for him during college, and eventually worked for him for a while, even after college. Even since then, it's just coincidental. My cousin's niece is also a big-time architect up in the Bay Area, up in Sonoma, Napa area. And she just texted me the other day and says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that our family is doing all this architecture stuff." So it's kind of fun. I mean, it's just being creative. I guess it's a talent that you have to decide to do when you're in high school, because you have to go to architecture school. You have to have heavy in math and science, and you don't really just kind of winging it. You have to kind of go through a lot of schooling and other such. So I just love it. I call it a passion profession, and I love what I do. So that really helps to have a job like that.
That's great. That's great. Throughout your career, you've actually highlighted a couple of your favorite projects. One of them, I believe, it's called Reboot Modern.
Yes.
What other projects have you done that have kind of, highlighted your career? Is there anything specific that stood out to you?
Well, it was interesting when I became my own company, which was probably about 1988, when I first had been working for other companies, and I put out my own shingle at the time. It was actually an office at the Weltern down in mid LA, and we started working. And a client called me and says, "Hey, I bought a property down in Mexico, and where? In Cabo San Lucas." I go, "I went to Cabo before." And this is before they even had a major airport. They were running their planes at a place, the Palmilla Hotel, where the current golf course is. That used to be the runway. So I was actually go down there. So I went down there and I started doing these homes in Mexico, and I opened an office down there. Actually, for 12 years, I had an office down there. And so I've done some projects that it's interesting now that when you do a project and then you go back, then you fast forward years later, and then, boy, that project meant a lot. I didn't realize it had so much impact on what I'm doing now. And I mean that by a couple things. Like down in Mexico, you're building out a concrete block, you're dealing with hurricanes. And so you're dealing with that kind of a natural disaster. But that's just what they do. They're building out a concrete block. They have concrete roofs. Hurricanes come and go, and the house still stays there. And now we fast forward to now, and all of a sudden we're thinking of the technologies that we're used to be doing when we're building, in another country. And so there were some houses that we did and projects that I did down there. So it was not just relating to a fire resiliency, which we'll obviously be talking about in a little bit here, but it also meant to me like the fact that I was able to design a lot more inside outside with the climate, meaning that you have homes that you have your living areas are open, with the window and door systems now, and especially in Southern California where the weather is great, and you're trying to create a home that doesn't feel like you're inside or outside. And I was naturally doing that because of the great weather down there. And the third thing is that you maybe didn't design a home with hallways, because I tried to design a house where, why are we air conditioning all these rooms? Maybe we can design a house so it's a smaller house, even though maybe a 8,000 square foot house, but design it as if it were only just maybe the owners or the couplers there. So maybe they have a smaller house like the main house, and then you'd have these casitas or things that you'd walk outside to go to the guest rooms. But if I can design a house, because we've all traveled and we want to have a property. We've all been to great hotels and great boutique hotels mainly, and we always get to that hotel and we go, gosh, I really wished, we can have my home look like this. Or when you're in your home, you said, well, I wish we could have it like a boutique hotel. So I learned a lot by what I did in Mexico. And so there's some homes I'm really proud of what we did down there. Some award-winning houses that we did back in the 90s that are now coming about is like, wow, that was a really cool house. And so I'm now using parts of that in some of our new projects.
Yeah, and that's great experience to influence your design and your approach to your design too, as you do more projects in the future too. So that's great experience that you've had. So DSI has recently collaborated with Burge Architects on a couple of projects, actually. One of them was California's first ever zero carbon home called 01, and they did another one called 02. So that was a really exciting project for us to be a part of. So talk about your experience with that project.
Well, there was a couple things that came out of that. And the other side note that I wanted to mention is that when we were talking about this house that I did in Cabo San Lucas, I clearly recall, because my client was actually from Texas, and I've never worked with kind of anything on a high-end level besides just plugging in a TV or a phone. It was back in the 90s. And we ended up doing so much technologically to that house. We were on the cover of, I think it was not AV Digest, but what was there was a magazine that was specializes in audio video. And I remember being on the cover with this project because it kind of falls back to working with your company. And it just showed that, even in a house like that as a second home, it had some things I really learned to appreciate in dealing with some early on systems. And then we fast forward to these carbon neutral homes, and it's, again, a little tie-in. The principal that was the client, actually, the son now has taken over the company, and he just called me 2 days ago, and I met him at the Palisades, and he's actually buying up a property in the Palisades, and we're going to do, I guess you could call it a 03 in the Palisades as a fire rebuild. So, but it's not a fire rebuild purpose. The whole point of the 01, 02 is looking at it as a different way. You're not using gas appliances, you're using all electric. You're trying to figure out similar that you might have in a LEED built home where are the materials coming from, and should you be using this type of concrete or should we be doing this type of foundation? So I had a conversation about the 02 home because you can build something for somebody which is beautiful maybe in a magazine, but then you have to me, the best homes are the ones you have to go back to the users and the clients, like maybe 2 years or 5 years later or 10 years later even, said, how's it been? How's your utility bill? We all said it was going to be this. Is it really that? And so it's that, not necessarily a life cycle of a home, which is obviously they talk about life cycle of materials, of using that, but it's actually get the experience of the homeowners. And it's encouraging because these new homeowners are going, yes, it's been great living in this property without any sacrifice of quality or any sacrifice of comfort. And so we can do this, And so we're actually taking these other technologies and putting them into our fire rebuild projects. And we're not waiting for code to change. It's almost like we're calling it our Burdge standard. This is our code. And we're doing these. If you want one of our homes, this comes with our homes.
Sure. And that actually ties into my next question for you. So if you had to think back to the best client experience you've ever had, what was that for you? What project or type of client?
Well, we've been fortunate. We've worked with many, many, many great clients. And, being in Malibu, it could be known for, there's a lot of celebrities, Malibu people, or there's Fortune 500 top business people, or just even just recently, you're dealing with people that are not of any kind of notoriety or fame, but they're just homeowners, and they're just maybe people you met from your church, and and their houses burned down. You're talking about modest. This is just their home. It's not like was meant to be like is on the cover of Architectural Digest, and I'm going to make it really great, and I'm going to do things and for entertaining. And so we've run the whole gamut of from modest, very modest clients. And so I would say a lot of my unnamed modest clients that really are, whether it's the older couple in their 70s that we had to rebuild for, that they had the energy to even to do it. And we had clients that said, no, I lived in this old traditional house, and now I get to do something fun. Let's do a shipping container home. And I like flew back in my chair. We want to do what? You know, this is like it's not coming from a 20-year-old. It's coming from a 70-year-old. So those are some of the great clients. And then, you know, we've had fortunate to work with some really great celebrities. I'll never forget working. We'd worked with Matthew McConaughey on his house in Malibu, and it just, I don't know, we just got to get along. But the funny story was every time he would travel somewhere and he came back from a trip, and we started on, I thought we had one style that we had agreed on, like let's do maybe kind of a Balinese style. And so he'd come back from a trip from Africa and he'd go, well, no, now I want to can we put this canoe over the island or something? It's something he found. So it was kind of fun, you know. So if you're not having fun doing it, then we shouldn't be doing it. And so I've had the pleasure of working from, obviously clients are tough. Some clients are great. Some clients, you know, the couple is great or the family is great. And so that's part of our job, you know, as a residential architect. You just have to know that you're going to hopefully want to feel like you're creating a lifestyle for them and an opportunity for them to be living in their lifestyle, which would be cool.
Sure, absolutely. On the flip side of that, what's been the worst experience you've had with a client?
Well, I don't know if we can publish any of the worst experiences, but no, you know, there's been experiences that you start a job and you think it's all going to go well. It's really, I can look back at it now. I mean, for all the homes and projects that we did, you know, when it didn't click with really the team. It's not necessarily the client. It's like, you know, like the builder didn't work out, or maybe an engineer. And these are people that you maybe used in the past. And then something happened in their life, and that's happened a lot. It seems like lately, I don't think it's anything about getting older. It's just that things happen. So you had like this really great team that you did 3 or 4 projects with, and then it's like if you had the bad link in the chain, I mean, it really does affect a job. And so, you know, I'm not one to point fingers to anybody, but, you know, we would be working with a builder, and then that builder is not performing anymore. But the client will, well, you recommended this builder, and then all of a sudden I'm the bad guy. And so it didn't, it's not like the job didn't turn out well, but it's just, it wasn't as fun or not necessarily fun, but it wasn't as productive, or it just ended up not being what everyone thought it would be in the beginning. And not to say that the client's not talking to me now, but it's just that it was just a situation. And we'll own up to it. And when they thought about it, they knew it wasn't something I did, but it was just the way it was kind of ended up with the project. And but now that they're into the project and they're into the house, they're fine. But it was circumstances, and you know, that's life, and you just have to kind of roll past it. You know, unfortunately, just like if fortunately nothing happened by peril. It's not like, did somebody die here? I mean, it wasn't like terrible. But we're still building a house. Can we just work through this? And we did. So it's not like it ended up being a bridge collapsed and, you know, something bad happened.
Sure.
It's just, listen, people have their projects and they have their money, and they want to have the best result. So, and why not start that way?
Absolutely. So a lot of our clients come to us with over-the-top requests of things that they want that we maybe have never done before. What would you say has been a really outlandish request or expectation of your clients that maybe you've never done before or you didn't know how to handle?
Well, on a technology side or just on a design side? Well, I mean, it's interesting because it kind of goes both ways, because a client, I have a saying, ideas are free until we have to build them. So we start out a job and I said, I want all your ideas, even if they're crazy ideas. I mean, maybe we're not going to build a bridge to Catalina, or we're not going to do something crazy, or some cantilever that doesn't exist in a structural format. But because we try to go both ways on that, where I'm telling clients, okay, I want to hear from you, and not just you, but your partner, and even some of your family members, you know. So I want to hear these crazy ideas, and then I'll also bring some more ideas. You know, we've worked with people in these are just coming to mind. I mean, different cultures, if you're grown up or brought up some way, whether by yourself or your religion, you may have a different version of how you are making a bathroom or a closet or something. And so I'm going to go, well, why would we put this toilet in the middle of this? Wouldn't you want some privacy here? It's like, well, don't worry about it. So we're trying to push certain things, and you can't necessarily change somebody if they've got certain cultures that they abide by. But I would say, I mean, it's not, you could say, is that something that you maybe tend to be more conservative if you're not going to delve into something that's interesting? But what I'm trying to do now is, I've even told my own staff this, is that whatever we've done in the past, those are jobs that we did for those clients. The jobs that we're doing now, besides being more fire hardened, I'm trying to create other ideas. Every morning I get up early and I search the web, and I got these great websites I follow on design all around the world. Like, there's always, like, it's the architect that has an ego thinking, I'm going to do something that's never been done before. That's not true. It's probably been done even in Pakistan, or might have been done in Africa somewhere. So these, just on the web now, there's so many great sources. You go, look at this cool thing. Like, I thought that was my idea, right? So, but I'm not going to stop us from not trying to use it. And that's what I'm telling my staff now. I said, let's have some fun, but create, because our clients should expect that. Let's give them some interesting ideas. It used to be, whether it was clever, gosh, we'll put a window in a pool, or let's put, speakers in a pool. Ooh, wow, speakers in a pool or something. It's like, well, those aren't really cool. I mean, are those crazy ideas? Not necessarily. But to me, it's like, be open-minded, and it can probably work out.
So let's start talking kind of about the biggest natural disaster in modern history, right? With the Palisades Fire, even including Malibu as well. So after the Woolsey Fire of 2018, you and your team started the Reboot initiative. So explain what that is to us, and are you finding yourself circling back to that now after Palisades?
Well, that was a big fire. I mean, it even started even before Woolsey in 2018. I mean, I've been living in the Malibu area for 40 years, and so, in fact, my wife and I built our first home with the aftermath of the old Topanga fire in '93. That was the first home that we built up in La Costa foothills. Since then, I've just found out that it burned in the Woolsey fire. In the Palisades fire 30 years later. So. It's some areas are more known for fires. Obviously, the Palisades is around just as much as Bel Air and Los Angeles is around Chaparral, that has potential to ignite. And if it's windy, it's going to cause you to, burn down your neighborhood, as they say, which it happened, or in Altadena and Pasadena. It's tremendous loss. I think that what we're trying to do is. And when we did the whole Reboot thing, it was more of a thing that I'm not just an architect, but I was a member of the community, and raised my kids there. So it wasn't just I was an architect. I felt like I had to do something. I wanted to help people. So we got a bunch of other professionals, contractors, and all the local architects. We said, what are these people going to need, from us? It's like these people you don't plan to have your house burned down. So you've lost everything. So what can we do in our profession? So we started Reboot, which is Rebuild Malibu, and I actually created a whole other thing, which is called the Bujas movement, and I'll explain that in a second too. So the whole Reboot thing was Rebuild Malibu, but it was also an idea that we did a whole symposium at a shopping center that we did out in Trancas, where we brought speakers in, and we had called vendors up, and we, from window and door companies, different people, or siding companies, so that people can kind of, like an expo. So I just said, well, we're just going to do this. I mean, it's not something I'm going to get paid out of it. We need to provide the community a little bit of help to feel like there's that. And we had shop vendors that were donating materials. We had a lot of people from donated a lot of things to help people because they had lost all their clothes, and so we had people come in, and a great amount of clothing and other personal items were at that same expo. So it kind of like that was more of just being a community member and feeling like you have to totally do a give back, and it's like people either are involved or they're not involved. And I get involved, and it was just immediate. And the day after the fire, I went to Um, I was on the other side in Westlake, and I went to every Home Depot I could find, and I bought 12 generators and went to Walmart and bought a bunch of waters, and I got a U-Haul truck and literally just came in and just started delivering because I was hearing text messages from friends. And that's the same time people were bringing supplies on boats. It was kind of like this boat brigade. People were dropping off in Point Doom and anything they can go to get supplies into their friends and families. It was just like people are just called into action. So it was like that was just something that just felt like natural to me to do. So
Yeah,
we did it.
absolutely. And that's great that the community can come together regardless of your background or where
Yeah.
you're from, and you just all pitch in and you do what it takes to take care of your community.
Right.
So that's really honorable. So continuing on, what are some challenges that you think the Palisades and Malibu community will face in this rebuild process? I mean, you have insurance challenges, permit challenges. Can you explain or talk about some of those?
Yeah, well, I wasn't planning on, I started my business to be a fire rebuild expert, or this is what I'm going to be known for or be doing, even in the years that we're doing right now. But we have learned a lot. And so I tell people out of this fire, we have jobs from the Woolsey fire. That was in 2018, November. We signed people up in 2019. It's been 6 years later, and houses are just getting finished. You said, well, that's 6 years ago. That seems like a long time. I said, well, most people actually, the only reason they're rebuilding is because, well, listen, rarely did you have anybody that had full coverage of insurance. I mean, we're talking at a $800,000 a foot insurance plus their rental in some fancy house that was equal to their house value and repay for all your goodies and everything you lost. Rare, like less than 5% had that kind of insurance. So the average Joe homeowner, who lost everything, let's say you had only $2 million from your policy to rebuild, but you need four. That's just the realities of construction. Everyone is only building because they won the SCE lawsuit, the Southern California Edison lawsuit, and they had to wait to settle that. And everyone that filed, that was a class action, huge lawsuit. Businesses that were shut down, we had a business that we sued the SCE, so we all got in on that. I don't think there's that super big lawsuit maybe there is. I haven't really heard of one, from what's happening there. So people are really, how am I going to do this? And these are even people that maybe they have the money, but what do they, call their grandma? Here's another $2 million I'm going to have to use to rebuild my house. So the financial end of it is really tough because, you talk to different insurance companies, they go, oh no, we'll give you $325 a foot. Well, that's going to rebuild my mailbox. I can't survive on this. So what are they going to do? So people, unfortunately, it's like either the will to rebuild isn't there. If you're in your 70s or 80s or whatever, I'm done. So your communities are going to change. Unfortunately, it just happens. The evolution of a community and why it became a great community, it's going to be years. I don't know 10 years from now what the Palisades is going to look like in Altadena. I can only tell you after 6 years, even in Malibu, it's, the families that were there, they find a new school district and they either moved to New Palisades case, they've either moved to Santa Monica, they moved to Newport, they've moved to Santa Barbara, they've moved to Beverly Hills, and they're going to settle there and they're probably going to like it. So they're probably not going to move back because you go where your kids are going to school usually, or your church. And so a lot of the displacement that happened in Malibu, people moved to Westlake, Thousand Oaks, and they didn't come back because, hey, this is nice out here. So it's a complete displacement, and it's so tough because no one wants the developers to come in and take all the homes and buy all this stuff. And it just happens, and it's unfortunate. But how can we change that in the future? And I say to people, that everyone has to be part of this rebuilding effort all the way to the government, meaning that if the cause of the fire is because of chaparral igniting and then in the winds, all those embers are then going to come into a neighborhood and then attack the trees and the vegetation and the old fences and all the stuff that's in the house. They have to do their part. They have to clear their brush before we even get to ours. So then you have to also look at the neighborhood has to harden their abilities for fire resiliency, and then you as a homeowner do your part. So it's like a three-pronged thing. So that's what we're doing now. I'm involved with other groups that we're helping put together the programs, and we're working throughout California because the people that did it after the Tubbs Fire, after the Paradise Fire, the Oakland Fire, the San Diego Fire, we're working through the AIA, our American Institute of Architects, to see what have they been doing successfully. Neighborhood, neighbor, homeowner, and then creating this template to say, we just have to do this. I had an article in Sunset Magazine last month, and I have a quote that says, we live in a fireplace. If you decide to live in a fireplace, you don't know when the next log's being thrown in there, so be prepared. Otherwise, you're asking for it.
Absolutely. And I think, kind of like you said, we're going to start to see a shift in the community. People are going to move, either wherever they have moved, they're going to stay put, or they're not going to return to the Palisades or Malibu community. So it's going to, reshape the entire rebuild from, rebuilding homes, businesses, everything's going to change. So along the Malibu coastline, there's hundreds of homes, obviously, that have been impacted, that have been lost. And you have septic systems and you have power lines that run all through this coastline. So what is the plan for the city to sort of put all of this back together?
Well, when you're referring directly, when you say the Malibu coastline, this is the first time in anybody's mind or any kind of history that over 300 homes just gone in a day. That was monstrous. You might have a storm surge that takes out 2 or 3 homes. They were on little wooden piers, built, and maybe they needed to come down. But, unfortunately that happens, when you have storm surges back from the 80s or a number of years ago, or an earthquake or whatever, another natural disaster. So, actually they are doing some great things. We've said all along, is like after a fire, like now's the time to improve your infrastructure. It's electrical service, water service, and in the case of Malibu, we're mostly is on septic. So the Southern California Edison, which is most of these fires seem to be, or they're sparking a power line, they're downing their power lines. I hear, which is, if they do it, that's great, downing the power lines in the Palisades and Altadena. And even along PCH, they've actually started already. They've put all the transformer vaults in there, and they've set them in there, and they're already taking them down. The lines are still there because there are homes still there to service that, but eventually that'll all be underground power. And besides the aesthetics, my God, it's going to be unbelievable. It's like the mumbo jumbo of wires everywhere. People from Europe come over here and says, "What are you guys doing? I mean, you have all these terrible, ugly wires. I mean, can you underground them?" So, listen. Now's the time to do that. Upgrade to the water service is also a huge thing. That's always happened. There's more than enough excuses to why they can't fix a tank or upgrade a line or pump to that tank or keep better water sources. So fire hydrants aren't running dry, even though, and it's true, the capacity of anything is not meant to be a wildfire. The whole point of the fire department, they don't supposed to come out and do a wildfire. There are companies, CAL FIRE deals with wildfires. My son used to be a wild inland firefighter, in Oregon and Idaho, so I know that business. But it's not the fire department's job to go in and put out all these houses, nor do you have the water capacity. The other thing is then on the septic and the sewer, it's been talked about, many meetings on whether or not we can create a sewer line on PCH. The problem is, even though it's a great idea, is that the Malibu was formed in 1993 for the one premise is they didn't want LA City to run a sewer line up to Malibu, and then we'd have all these unbuildable lots that are on hillsides, and we'd be tripling our population. So that probably is not going to happen, even though it's a great idea. Or maybe you say, hey, well, let's just do it for the beachfront homes because that's great. That's best for the environment. The Coastal Commission, sea life, septic systems so close to the beach. But I loved the idea in the beginning. I just don't think it's possible. Malibu has a new sewer plant for the commercial core, so we're going to help the water quality in downtown Malibu with Gila Bay and working with them. But as far as the new sewer, so we unfortunately have to be putting septics, but they're advanced treatment septics. They're super high quality. Unfortunately, it's going to have every homeowner, they got to spend all their money, whatever money they had on a septic system and the seawall. in a concrete house that's raised up higher for FEMA floodplains. But it's tough. But they are doing the right thing for the most part, and most of the utilities, they are taking advantage of the situation and improving.
And the Coastal Commission, currently, it's difficult to go through with that process. I mean, how is that going to change? How do you see that changing?
Well, what's interesting with Gavin Newsom's executive order, I mean, this must have been the hardest thing ever. I can't imagine being in that room, because the Coastal Commission, which is a huge organization in the state of California, super powerful. I mean, they had to put muzzles on and shackle them to their chairs and saying, hey, you can't be involved in any of these decisions on the beach. And they're probably going, I can't imagine even being in that meeting. But if they were involved, yes, nothing would get done. And it's really not they're involved in all the approval processes. Their whole point of the coastal, it's kind of a misnomer. Malibu still can issue your building permit to get a building built on the beach. It's just that you're in an appeal zone. So the Coastal Commission can appeal your project if they don't like your geology report, or you asked about the septic report, they don't like the way you're analyzed, maybe something, or a wall, or the string line, how you lined up your building with a neighbor. So it's not like they're involved. You have to go to the Coastal Commission. It's just that they're like an overwatch. So they're going to go, maybe that was approved by Malibu, and maybe we don't like what they approved. So they have to sit back if you're only adding 10%. So we have some clients saying, well, gosh, thank you for the 10%, but most beach houses are small. These houses were built in the 50s and 60s. Maybe they were 1,200 square feet. You're going to go through the whole process and for 120 square feet. So once your house is all built, well, I appreciate the 120 square feet, but I think I'm going to want to rebuild as much as I could on the beach, because there's no limit on square footage on a beach house. So a lot of our clients are contemplating, what's a fast track to go through coastal. I tell them it's kind of a fast track to get your septic system improved and build your concrete podium and do your geology. So it's really just working with the planning department. Don't ask for variances and get your project through. So we're kind of doing some hybrid projects now, which at the end of the day, fast forward 5 years from now, they're going to say, well, gosh, I'm so glad you didn't just talk me into 120 square feet. Maybe I can add 1,000 more square feet and get that extra bedroom I wanted and stuff like that. So you have to kind of look more towards the future, maybe not just what you have right now.
Sure, absolutely. And when you're considering during the rebuild process, when you're putting together your design, what materials are you sourcing, or talk about, fire resistant materials and tailoring your design toward going to more of a fire resistant rebuild?
Well, I appreciate you using the word fire resistant, fire resilient. It's like when people say, can you make something fireproof? It's like waterproof or bulletproof. It's like, it's really your best ideas to get towards a more resilient product. The good news is, like, we were at the Builder Show in Las Vegas this last January or February, whenever it was, a couple months ago, and there's a really great amount of companies now that have been creating products, not just for this recent fire, but other fires. There's exterior siding materials that are made out of fiber cement that you could touch them and look at them. They absolutely very much like a piece of wood. And I tell clients, listen, if you want that wood-looking house, whether it be a traditional cottage or something, traditional cottage, more modern, let's put this on here. It's no maintenance for you. You're not staining the house like if it were a teak house on the beach, and spending $25,000, every year to get somebody out there to restain or oil their house, and you still want that look. You don't want the modern plaster house. So there are those materials. It's all about, in basic design, we tell people it's 85% ember intrusion, and that's why your house burned down. In beach houses, it's even worse because neighbors were 5 feet away from you, and you have a 2,000-degree object burning next to your house, and it doesn't matter what your house is made out of, your house will burn down just from the heat, not from the fire, from the heat. And so the window systems, metal sloping roofs, no embers can catch in, no vents, crawl space vents, attic vents, gone. Everything is tight, and having that type of ability to understand that. So one of the bigger questions has always been, the first knee-jerk reaction is, oh my gosh, I don't want to build a wood house anymore. I want to build out of concrete, or I want to build out of steel. Listen, the steel framed houses, Moen framed houses still burn. You can think that you're going to build this house and just in your own mind, maybe it's just you feel good because you're not using wood studs anymore and you're building on the beach. Maybe that's better for termites if you're building out of light gauge steel or something. So we have some clients that we're just doing that anyways. Or back to my Mexico example of, we have a client who has a house in Mexico. His house has burned down 3 times. He did the Woolsey fire. We just finished his house in the Woolsey fire. During the Woolsey fire, he bought a house in the Palisades. He finished the house in the Malibu just a year ago. His house in the Palisades just burned down. He goes, enough is enough. So he's going to build out a concrete block walls and a concrete roof. 1-story house in Casa Lamar. I go, great. We've all done it. Let's get the band back together. Let's do another project like Mexico. Let's do our house right here in the Palisades. So some clients like that, we're going to do that. That's a lot more money per square foot to build, but in their mind, it says, I'm going to live here. This is my family house. I don't. To my hurricane example, if there's a fire, it'll maybe destroy stuff on the outside, but I can clean out the inside of my house and hose it down, and I still have the outlets in the wall, and the plumbing's in the wall, and the roof's still there, and the floors, and so it's just like a remodel. It's not a brand new start from construction. So we're researching all systems, finding out what's the best, but then having that heart-to-heart with the client when it really starts is, I know you're amped up before, like we thought this is what we have to build out of, but let's look at this realistically.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of emotion too. When a client's just lost their home, they've lost everything. They've lost all of their belongings, their vehicles, everything. And, that's a delicate subject to approach the rebuild when they do have emotion tied to it. So I don't know if you kind of have noticed that when you're going through this process is, there's a lot of emotion, and it adds to the overall, I don't know if I would call it pressure, but it adds to your ability to rebuild their home, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the first meeting, you're a therapist, and you're grieving with them. I mean, this is terrible. I mean, even the more recent fires. I mean, everyone has lost things. I mean, I've never lost, our full house, but my office was burned down twice now, and my Airstream with all my personal things was my office in the back, and that was burned in the Woolsey fire. And the fire in December of last year, the Franklin fire, almost took our office again. And so, you go through this and you can understand that. And it's a full PTSD situation. It goes on for your life. It's years. It's like you keep thinking about it. The anniversary date shows up and you're going, ugh. You remember it was like terrible. Remember where we were, or maybe I was traveling, I couldn't get to my house, or God forbid somebody died, in which there were people that died, or you lost a pet or whatever. It's traumatic. And so you do have to, like I said, I just because we're offices in Malibu, we live there, we it seems to be this is part of our culture. And so we have to deal with it. But for the most part, families are unbelievable. And like I said, this is either the newly married couple that were married for 2 weeks and their house burned down, or the couple that had been there they're celebrating their 50-year anniversary and their house burned down. So we're getting the whole range of clients and perspectives. And so we have to, it's just because of who I am and just talking to people, I can empathize with that. And so we do talk about that, and then try to get them back to a happy place where we're talking about fun stuff. Like, gosh, let's build maybe something, rebuild a really cool place for you guys. And do you maybe not need it so big? And so I interject some interesting, fun ideas and put some humor in there where I think it's appropriate. And people get them to smile, because it is devastating.
Absolutely. It's very real what they're going through. So as we kind of wrap up here, I have one more question for you, and then I'll open it up to if you have anything else you want to discuss. So we've talked a lot about your involvement in the community, and you've been there for community members, even outside of, build your building efforts. You talked about how you went to Home Depot yourself and you bought generators and water and everything that people needed. So, as a member yourself of the Malibu community, how do you influence change across the whole industry to raise the standard for building practices and being able to rebuild with the fire resilient materials? How do you influence that change across the industry?
So we've already started on some of these initiatives. I'm now been brought in as a board member of the Malibu Foundation. The Malibu Foundation was founded and actually birthed out of the Woolsey fire, where a bunch of, again, influential people in Malibu, mostly musicians that had had their houses burned down, and actors and such. And we created this, and they raised like $5 million in like 2 weeks, like during the fire. Say during the fire, right after the fire when everything was closed down and people were evacuated, and there was fundraising events. I remember going to those, and we were an integral part. And so that Malibu Foundation was really in place to figure out, okay, now that we did the first part of helping families out, like maybe give them things that they can do to rebuild. So now what we're doing with them is we're creating almost like we'll call it the Malibu Resiliency Center, where we're trying to make, of all the towns in the world, Malibu is very well known, even though it's part of the Palisades Fire. It's Malibu Palisades Fire because of the amount of homes that burned in Malibu. And because I'm from Malibu, we are trying to create it as, okay, well, why can't we be the poster child of fire resiliency? Why can't our town? So we're working with city officials on that. And back to the Malibu Foundation, one of the best things that came out of the Woolsey fire is the formation of the brigades. And what that is that is a community-based, grassroots, 100% homeowners and their kids, older kids, that they now are trained to, quote unquote, stay back, cert trained, regular trained by the LA County Fire Department, where not just for like a mop-up operation or clean up after we put out this fire, but they saved homes in the Sarah Retreat area. Only one or two homes burned down. That was sad, 1 or 2 homes, but they probably saved 30 homes from going down. There's Malibu Brigade. So what they're doing on the we call it non-fire time or peacetime, they're actually now, we're starting a program through the Malibu Foundation to get them to harden and knock on neighbors' doors and say, old Joe that lives next door, can we work on trimming your trees, or maybe we can take these old rickety fences, we call it kindling, can we move that away, and set up programs. So we're not just waiting for a disaster to happen, but when the disaster happens, we're ready. Wouldn't it be great if when the next fire happens, not if, but when the next fire happens, we can say, gosh, we only lost 4 homes. Terrible, lost 4 homes, but we didn't lose 400, or we didn't lose 4,000. So we all can do this, and other communities are doing this, like I said, across the state, because we're in a WUI environment, which is the wildland urban interface, and there are codes set up for that. If you want to live in this fireplace, as I say, just be aware and be more prepared. And so I'm now involved in both these nonprofit organizations, also within our own office, creating with the Reboot, and then also this I mentioned before about the term Boo House, which is BUHAUS, and that organization was formed based on, if you know architecture, there's a group out of the 30s called Bauhaus. It was a German movement, started in Germany with a bunch of German and European architects, and it was the change of style. Like, they didn't want to do traditional style; they wanted to do modern. So it was a group of thinkers, high-level design and spirited thinkers. So I took the name Bauhaus, I made it into Boo House, copyrighted it, and now that name is the center of our resiliency center, and we're now hopefully a place that people can go. I want school kids to learn about it in school. You're going to learn about living in a fire area, and how do you build better in fire resiliency, and how can we live our lifestyle where we're aware. And so between the Malibu Brigade and the Resiliency Center and some of these other things, it's just keeping those going and maybe making a model for other communities that they can do in the future.
Absolutely. And it really is an individual and community effort and commitment to taking care of, the area to help prevent it in the future? Because it's not if, it's when, but
Right.
how prepared are we? So that's all of the questions that I had for you. Do you have anything else that you want to add or talk about?
I think we kind of hit on everything. I mean, when I do talk about this subject, it's something that, again, I didn't think that this is some part of a resume that I had thought that I'd be doing, or this was like when you go to school and you're going to teach these classes, and, these classes didn't even exist. So the only thing I could say is kind of like, which is actually, well, unfortunately, a lot of things change only after a disaster. The 1933 Long Beach earthquake actually hardened our earthquake codes in California and Los Angeles area. It took a disaster to create that. It takes a disaster to go, oh my gosh, we don't want this to happen again. So we have to, as humans, Homo sapiens, community members, just maybe the forward thinkers get together and they say, okay, whether it be climate change or whether it be sea level rise or whether it be the next fire, it's just trying to prepare realistically, how can we handle this in non-involved politics, and just say, if we're going to decide to live in this community, what should we expect to try to keep our community? Because the community is really best. It's based on people, not places. It's not based on buildings. It's based really on the people living there. And so how do we make that better? And whatever I can do to help out, then I'm here to help.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a really great conversation. Thank you so much, Doug, for your time and being here with us today.
Well, thank you for putting on the podcast. Look forward to hearing about it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.